The long-running process to decide whether or not to allow a 28-storey hotel in Dunedin ended yesterday, with a Resource Consent Committee saying no to the idea. Subject to appeal, that appears to be the end of the $100 million project. The hotel drew plenty of opposition, including from historian and columnist Peter Entwisle, who joins us tonight with his reaction to the decision. Good evening, Peter.
Hi.
What were your thoughts on the hearing panel's decision?
Well, when I first heard it, I was relieved, and by the time I had read the decision, I was impressed and surprised. They give us a foremost reason for turning it down, the adverse visual effect on the city's character. And I was expecting it to be turned down on things like wind turbulence, adverse traffic effects, but no, they made this effect on the city's character the most important consideration. They also showed where that's embedded in the plan. This is historic. For a long time we've tried to persuade them that those things were there. This time they've come out and affirmed that they are.
Now, you've argued that a modernist building within the Dunedin's historic architecture was a problem with this project, but surely there are examples of where old and new can quite happily sit next to each other?
Certainly. In my submission to the committee, I pointed to Otago Boys High School in particular. 1985, Mr. Ted McCoy's new additions up there, which are, frankly modernist, and it works next to the old historic tower block. It works because they stand back and stand at a distance, and they defer to the historic building which stands above them. On this site at 41 Wharf Street, with a building of these dimensions and frankly modernist, against the background of the whole central historic city, that could never work.
Now, you criticise the design as a dull imitation of a 60-year-old New York skyscraper. What would you have preferred designers to come up with?
Well, I would rather see something like, say, the Gherkin in London, which is where modernism is at now, or the Shard, also in London. And they're far more dynamic shapes, and they're much more attractive. However, even a really good contemporary bit of modernism on that site, on that scale, would never work for the reason I gave before.
Now, you also weren't keen on the placement of said hotel. Where do you think would be a good idea or a good location for something like this?
Well, if you had a really good design, that would be nice, in the same proportions, you could try siting such a building in Dunedin over on Portsmouth Drive, where the old Shoreline Hotel used to be. Now, there, it wouldn't be in the face of the historic city. You could start a new contemporary city, if you like, of modernist towers over there. It wouldn't face the problems that this one faced at 41 Wharf Street. However, having said that, it might not get consent anyway, because I don't know that on that site, on Portsmouth Drive, it would be a permitted use either. So it might just fall over on account of all the other problems to do with traffic hazard, wind, air turbulence, so on and so on and so on. But from a purely aesthetic point of view and not getting in the face of the historic city, that's where you could have a building of that sort in those proportions. But let's have an up-to-date bit of modernism and something a good deal more dynamic than this boring box.
Now, some have criticised the decision for rebuffing those who want to invest in the city. How do you respond to that?
Education. The decision shows clearly that these values are embedded in the plan. There are people like Norcom Barker, there are people like John Christie of the Chamber of Commerce, others who submitted in support of this development. If they want these things to happen, and I would like them to happen too, they should make it their business to try to acquaint developers with this aspect of the Dunedin City Plan. That if you're going to build in these parts of town, you're going to have to conform to these requirements and fit in with the historic city.
Peter Entwisle, historian, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.